former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, served as mayor from 2011 to 2019, famously said, and I quote, "Never let a crisis go to waste." Rahm was paraphrasing, or if you would, reinventing a statement from now famous professor and activist whose name I'll mention here shortly, but that professor said, in the arena of action, a threat or a crisis becomes almost a precondition to communication. Now, those on their face, those two statements don't seem to be interconnected. When you say never let a crisis go to waste, that doesn't have the erudite sound of the second quote, which once again is, in the arena of action, a threat or a crisis becomes almost a precondition to communication. But they are intrinsically the same, and they're built off of this list of rules that have a now famous book built around them. And I'm going to read these and I'm going to comment a little bit. And I want, as you listen to this, I want you to think about recent events and how these recent events are interplaying, how they're interacting, how they're intersecting, if you will, and what that means for us. And then I'm going to ask you, how long is it going to be before you're willing to open your eyes? Okay? So here we go. Rule 1. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Power is derived from two main sources, money and people. Have-nots must build power from flesh and blood. Okay, are you tracking? Listen, here's rule 2. Never go outside the expertise of your people. It results in confusion, fear, and retreat. Feeling secure adds to the backbone of anyone. Rule 3. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. You hear that? Of the enemy. Look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety, and uncertainty. Rule 4. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. If the rule is that every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because no one can possibly obey all of their own rules. Rule number 5. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. I know I'm looking smug right now, and I'm going to be okay with that. Rule 6. A good tactic is one your people enjoy. They'll keep doing it without urging and come back to do more. They're doing their thing, and will even suggest better ones. Rule 7. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. Rule 8. Keep the pressure on. Never let up. Keep trying new things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit him from the flank with something new. So I want to say something right now. Rule 9. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Imagination and ego can dream up many more consequences than any activist. Rule 10. If you push a negative hard enough, it will push through and become a positive. Violence from the other side can win the public to your side because the public sympathizes with the underdog. Ominous. The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. Never let the enemy score points because you are caught without a solution to the problem. Rule 12. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. So, who wrote these rules? Where do they come from and why? This list of rules is from a book, from the theory, from the principles, from the belief system, from the worldview of a radical Marxist, leftist, atheist named Saul Alinsky. I'm not going to get into Saul too terrible much right now, but he is, as I said, he was a radical. Some famous people who have studied under him were men like Rahm Emanuel, the Clintons, Barack Obama. Others have studied under people who have engaged with and adopted his theories and his practices. Many people, like, and this is a speculation of sorts, but you can hear it in the language that is used. Many people like Ilhan Omar have adopted the radical rules that Saul Alinsky implemented and taught to his students, to his disciples, to his followers. We see this in many people like Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, and to a large degree in people like Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Fry of Minneapolis. We see this in Melvin Carter of St. Paul. We also see this in the mayor of Los Angeles, whose name escapes me right now. We also see it in the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio. We see it in the governor of New York, Cuomo. We see this in places like Illinois and Ohio. It's really rampant, and there's a reason why it's rampant. It's spreading like wildfire in places like the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. It's just like gangbusters in the courts, and it's because the intellectual elite of the centers of education in the United States are at least 90 to 95% bought into this mentality. They are all students of Saul Alinsky to some degree or another, and they're passing that on to, or for years pass that on to their students, and their students are now passing it on to other disciples and followers. And we're seeing this now play out in government indoctrination centers. We call them public schools, but let's just be honest, they are government indoctrination centers. The soft sciences, sociology, psychology, and we see those taught at the primary and secondary education levels within the United States. They are taught in schools. The other soft arts like language and literature and whatnot, all of these things they're all enmeshed. They're enrolled, if you will, to make a play on words. They're all rolled up together in this, and it's intended not to merely broaden the horizons of the people who are being force-fed this, but it's meant to create a very particular mindset. It's meant to create a very potent thought process that results in automatons, people who parrot and oftentimes don't even know what it is that they're saying. they will cry out for things like justice, and they'll use modifiers that just, you can't modify justice. There's no modifier that you can put on justice. Instead of talking about equality, they talk about equity. Equality is everyone has opportunity to do something. Equity is everyone has the same result at the end of their endeavor. So two people, let's say they both happen to be African American or people of color, and they both go to school, and let's say they're both in the same school, and one of them comes from a more suburban, urban family, and another one comes from a more rural family, and they both have the same opportunities in that school. One of them does better than the other. The current system from this would decry the one who does better if he comes from a place of privilege, even though they have the same ethnicity, they share the same ethnic appearance. The proper mindset is, look, they had equal opportunity, just one of them did better. And it could be for a plethora of reasons. One maybe applied himself more, one applied himself less or not at all. They would fight against that. And if you were to point that out, they would begin to bring to bear on you these rules. And these rules become even more powerful if it comes to now highlighting the differences between a person who is white and a person who is considered a minority, especially an oppressed minority. And that's really where it becomes powerful, is now they can manufacture a crisis. And in manufacturing that crisis, they can put pressure onto that situation using these rules. And I want to go to a couple, if you will, of these rules very briefly. I'm going to start with Rule 12. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. So we have seen this played out in several key ways since the beginning of this year, but especially since about March, as the COVID-19 responses have come into bear. If anybody has a counter-cultural view on COVID-19, they have been, at times, especially if they speak out publicly and say, hey, look at this, look at what's happening, pay attention to what's going on, here is where this is dangerous. This person is isolated from anybody else who may agree with them. And then that pressure is used to crush them. Sometimes it's pressure by going to their employer, sometimes it's pressure by going to their circle of friends, depending on what level we're at. If we're dealing with a broad regional amount of pressure, or maybe just localized, you're seeing friends being put under pressure to force this person into agreeing, and that person will eventually capitulate and do just whatever you want me to do. I'll do. Just stop harassing me. Stop putting this pressure on me. This is not an accident. Now, these things have existed for millennia. Societal pressure on people has worked by and large a lot of times to shape people into productive members of society. But what Saul Alinsky posited with these rules is taking some general principles that have some positive aspects and positive impact and exploding them into a weapon, into a force to bring about a cultural Marxist revolution. And that's happening now in front of you, in your very presence. This is happening to you right now. End of story. You can't argue against that. We're seeing it constantly. And so I'm going to go to this other point, and I'm going to tie these two together. Well, obviously, because all of these rules are tied together. So one of these is Rule 8, keep the pressure on, never let up, keep trying new things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit him from the flank with something else. Now, that obviously ties into Rule 7, which is a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. So what did we see? We saw in the middle of March, we saw state after state after state, governor after governor after governor, mayor after mayor after mayor after mayor after mayor, county boards, all over the place. COVID-19, 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 COVID-19. We got to do this for your safety. We need to do that for your safety. And this is Rahm Emanuel's quote: "Never let a crisis go to waste." Nobody knew what COVID-19 was going to do, but it was the potential of the crisis that caused these people. Just understand this. These people were students in one way, shape, or form. They were disciples in one way, shape, or form of Saul Alinsky. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is all verifiable. This is all there. Even if it wasn't directly tied to a person who studied under Saul, who studied under a person who studied under Saul, who studied under a person who studied under Saul, it's all there. It's all verifiable. This is the mindset. These things are being taught all over the United States, and especially in the academy. Academians are teaching this all over. If it's not a hard science, engineering, mathematics, and there are people out there who tell you that even in mathematics this is becoming very common. All of that aside, these things are coming into place. So never let a crisis go to waste, or as I've already read, Alinsky said, in the arena of action, a threat or a crisis becomes almost a precondition to communication. In other words, not communication, oh, we need to talk about this, but now we can communicate why you need to submit to us. We're going to get this done. And you use a crisis to do it. Why? Because people are afraid. And when people are afraid, they're going to respond in what they view as their best interest. So, Rule 7, a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. Rule 8, keep the pressure on, never let up. Keep trying things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit them from the flank with something new. Bam. We can't scare people with global warming. Greta Thunberg, in her adolescence and her vitriolic anger against everybody who's ruined the world, how dare you? She can't accomplish it. So now, bam, COVID-19. Now, is COVID-19 real? Absolutely. It's coronavirus, like any other coronavirus. It can affect people in different ways. It's real, but it's a crisis that can be ballooned, mushroomed into something more. Now we're going to hit them with that. Bam, bam. Keep the pressure on. Bam, bam. Oh, guess what? People are starting to rebel. They're starting to react negatively. They've had enough. They're not going to take it anymore. Uh-oh. Guess what? Now we have something to work with. Memorial Day, May 25th, 2020. Tragically, George Floyd dies while in police custody. Clearly, some things could have been done differently, whether it was an act of murder or depraved indifference or failure to render aid, whatever the case might be. George Floyd dies in police custody. Guess what? Hit him with something new. Now, I'm not advocating that that was a setup, that it was a red flag event. I don't see red flags everywhere. I think there are some things that can be red flags. I don't know of anything in particular right now that I would point to in that regard. But it's a crisis. It's a new crisis. Oh no, police brutality, especially police brutality against a minority. Police brutality, no matter who it's done against, is a problem. But we're going to hit you with something new. Jump on this. And what did we see? in a matter of a few days, it had spread like wildfire across the United States and into the world. We were seeing people in France and Britain and Italy and other places picking up the mantra of Black Lives Matter Marxists to the core agenda, standing there with black power complaining about white power. And we were seeing it from whites and blacks and other ethnicities. And the mantra became cultural embedded racism, and we're going to hit you with this over and over and over and over and over again. We're just going to keep coming at you, and when we get you on this one, we're going to get you over here. First it was police brutality, then it was general white inherent implicit bias, bam, then it's white fragility, bam, and then it's oh, these statues are racist, bam. And some statues shouldn't exist, let's just be honest. They just shouldn't. There are, I understand why we memorialize some things, and just because something's memorialized doesn't mean that it's being memorialized for positive reasons, but some things shouldn't exist. But now we're going to start tearing down these statues. And when we're tearing down statues of slavery, anti-slavery abolitionists, we defaced a statue of a famous rock musician in Texas. Why? Why? Keeping us off our guard. Man. So that keeps it coming, right? Now what? Oh, people are starting to weary of that. Not everybody, but a lot of people are wearying of this constant race baiting over and over and over and over and over again. Now what? Bam! Back to COVID-19. Now we're going back to masks. And what are we going to do? And remember, masks weren't an integral part of this from the beginning. They weren't. And my wife pointed this out in a conversation with somebody the other day, and she's right. If they were so important, why weren't they important from the beginning? They suggested it, but they used an excuse that, well, we should be reserving the really good medical masks for medical personnel. Everybody else will be okay. They're going to work towards herd immunity. I almost said herd mentality. There's something else to be said there. Over and over and over again. But now masks are important. Why? Keeping us off our guard. As we respond to this one thing, and maybe we're being effective, and we're seeing this, legislators and others and small businesses are starting to sue governors and sue mayors, and they're winning, so now we're going to hit them with something else. And as the mask stuff comes into play, now they're getting businesses to cave to the pressure, so that now instead of it being mandated by government, which is going to have a hard time on a civil rights level enforcing this for very long, because people are sooner or later going to start to sue and go through the courts. Now we're going to put pressure on businesses, and we saw this in the city of Rochester, Minnesota. Mayor Kim Norton, she is a leftist, she's a Marxist. I don't care if that upsets people. I don't care if people who know me get upset at me for saying that she's a Marxist. Everything about her is Marxist. Everything about her ideology is Marxist. She goes and she passes an executive order, and she gets the city council of Rochester to go along with her. And then when small business owners start to justifiably complain because the mayor has ordered them to enforce this, and if they don't enforce it in their businesses, they're going to lose their right to do business in that city. They're going to lose their business license. The business owners say to her, fine, we'll take our business outside of the city of Rochester. And she then tweets publicly to the governor of Minnesota, Governor Walz, you need to make this public, or statewide. You need to mandate mask wearing statewide so, and I quote, people don't have the freedom to get away. Right? Keeping them off their guard, putting pressure on them. And then she justified it by saying she was tired of being bullied by white men. Or males in general. I don't remember exactly which, and I'm not going to go look up the tweet now. It's not all that important. Because it's this tactic. It's the rules for radicals that Saul Alinsky indoctrinated his disciples with. and it's being implemented, and they're keeping us off guard. And once the mask thing starts to wear out, once the businesses have all agreed we're going to mandate masks, and businesses are dropping like flies. Walmart's going to do it now. Target's going to do it now. Aldi just announced that they're going to be doing it, implementing mandatory mask. And if you can't wear a mask or won't wear a mask, you're not allowed in the store. And there again, businesses are free to mandate whatever they want for you to be able to shop there, within reason. Obviously, they can't single you out for your religion or for your ethnicity, but they can mandate what you, to some degree, will wear. So they're putting now, not the pressure's working on the businesses, and that's going to put pressure on the people, and the people are going to eventually go, okay, I just let me shop. I just need to buy groceries. I need to feed my family. Let me shop. All of that aside, there's no proof that the masks that they have people wearing have any impact on COVID-19. And so this is their tactic. This is how they're going to win. And as much as people don't want to believe that any of this stuff is actually an agenda, it is. And it's not a conspiracy theory. I've told somebody the other day that's a form of gaslighting. If your response to any of this is conspiracy theory, you're not researching. You don't understand societal, cultural warfare. It'd be one thing if I were, or others were saying, like, aliens are behind this and the lizard people are behind this. That's a little wonky. But this is not a conspiracy theory. This is an agenda. No person in their right mind is denying COVID-19. No person in their right mind is disputing the ugliness of ethnic hatred and ugliness of police brutality. But police brutality is ugly. But look at how these things intertwine. Right? Look how they intertwine. And the next thing is now the economy is crumbling. The economy is crumbling. And now we start to see how they're going to pit the haves and the have-nots against each other. This happens constantly. As soon as they kind of get some compliance in one area and people are also at the same time getting sick of it, they're going to hit us with, well, yeah, but look at these people aren't suffering, so we need to do something about that. And there are men out there like Elon Musk. I think he's wonky, to be honest with you. He's made his millions by bilking the government. He's a wealthy man anyway, but he's kind of standing up and saying, who is John Galt? You're going to have to read Atlas Shrugged if you want to get that. But over and over and over again, these rules for radicals by Saul Alinsky are being implemented against us. They are a weapon being used against us, and people are falling for it. And part of the reason they're falling for it is because they've been indoctrinated in the government indoctrination centers. So this just seems natural to them. Oh, yeah, I guess I better comply. And anybody who dares speaks out, personalize it, freeze them, polarize people against them, cut them off from support, cut them off from anybody who would agree with them. You are being manipulated, American people, and the church is either being manipulated or taking part in the manipulation. Atheist groups are being manipulated and being infiltrated if they weren't already part of it. It doesn't matter what your worldview is. It doesn't matter what your ideology is. It doesn't matter if you think you're safe from this because you have the right view on politics. You are being manipulated. And they will keep it up as long as you keep reacting and instead of being proactive or reactive. Start standing up. Start saying enough's enough. Take a stand. As always, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for being open-minded. Thanks for listening. I would ask that over here in the corner, somewhere on your screen, you hit the subscribe button. It's important, not for me, but because mainstream media, legacy media, isn't going to get the word out. They're not going to let people who don't toe the established line speak. So for the sake of liberty and for the sake of the defense of this nation, small little independent voices like mine need to be heard, especially the interviews. It's got very little to do with my commentary and a lot more to do with the interviews and the people who are affected when liberties are tread on. So once again, hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.